Annie Jacobsen's Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America, reads like a forensic excavation of a hidden chapter in American history, one where moral compromise, Cold War urgency, and scientific ambition collided on a scale that reshaped the post-war world. For U.S. readers who think they know the story of World War II's aftermath, Jacobsen's book is a disquieting reminder that victory did not end ethical dilemmas, it simply transformed them. She tells the story of how the United States, driven by fear of Soviet advances and hunger for technological superiority, quietly recruited scores of German scientists, some with direct ties to Nazi atrocities, and brought them to American soil to work on rockets, aviation, chemical weapons, and intelligence projects. The result is a narrative that reads like a spy thriller and a moral inquiry at once. Jacobsen opens with the human texture of the program, the men who were moved, the American officers who vetted and recruited them, and the bureaucratic machinery that sanitized their pasts. She introduces readers to the central figures: Wernher von Braun, the charismatic rocket engineer who would become the face of America's space program; Hubertus Strughold, a physiologist whose work on aviation medicine carried troubling ethical shadows; and dozens of lesser-known technicians and scientists whose expertise was suddenly in demand. Jacobsen's prose is vivid and often unsettling. She reconstructs interrogations, memos, and clandestine flights with the detail of a reporter who has combed archives and interviewed surviving participants. For American readers, the book's immediacy is a corrective to tidy national narratives. The triumphs of the space race and Cold War science were built on compromises that many preferred to forget. A central theme of Operation Paperclip is moral ambiguity under geopolitical pressure. Jacobsen shows how the nascent Cold War reframed priorities. In the immediate aftermath of Nazi Germany's collapse, Allied authorities faced a stark choice: prosecute every scientist who had worked for the regime or secure their expertise before the Soviets did. The U.S. military and intelligence communities chose the latter. Jacobsen traces how legal and ethical concerns were sidelined by strategic imperatives. Documents reveal that officials often whitewashed records, reclassified files, and reinterpreted evidence to clear scientists for transfer. For American readers, this bureaucratic sleight of hand is chilling. It demonstrates how institutions can bend moral standards when national security is invoked. Jacobsen does not shy away from the darkest corners of the story. She details the involvement of some German scientists in programs that used forced labor, human experimentation, and other crimes against humanity. These are not abstract allegations. Jacobsen reconstructs specific projects and the roles certain scientists played. She shows how, in some cases, the U.S. accepted explanations that minimized culpability or relied on the scientists' technical indispensability as a moral offset. The book forces readers to confront uncomfortable questions. Can scientific genius absolve moral complicity? And what price is acceptable for technological advantage? For American audiences who celebrate scientific achievement, Apollo launches, jet engines, missile defense, Jacobsen's account complicates the origin stories of those triumphs. Another major strand of the book is the bureaucratic choreography that made Operation Paperclip possible. Jacobsen follows the program through military intelligence offices, the newly formed CIA, and the corridors of the State Department. She shows how legal categories were manipulated. Nazi affiliations were sometimes reclassified as political unreliability rather than criminality. Records were stamped secret to prevent public scrutiny, and immigration rules were bent to admit specialists under military auspices. The narrative reads like a procedural comma. Memos are drafted, objections are raised and overwritten, and the machinery of government moves with a mixture of urgency and secrecy. For U.S. readers, this bureaucratic portrait is revealing. It shows how policy, law, and ethics can be reshaped by perceived existential threats. Jacobsen also explores the personal transformations that accompanied relocation. The German scientists and their families were uprooted, resettled in American military towns, and thrust into new roles. Some embraced their new lives and became patriotic contributors to U.S. projects. Others remained ambivalent, haunted by their pasts or resentful of their new masters. Jacobsen captures the cultural collisions, language barriers, social isolation, and the uneasy integration into American scientific institutions. She also shows how the U.S. benefited from the scientists' networks and institutional knowledge. Rocket designs, aeronautical research, and chemical expertise were transferred into American programs with astonishing speed. For readers in the United States, these human stories complicate the simple narrative of rescue and redemption. They reveal the messy human costs of geopolitical expediency. A striking feature of Jacobsen's book is her attention to the long arc of consequence. Operation Paperclip did not end with the scientists' arrival. It shaped decades of American science and policy. Wernher von Braun's work at Redstone Arsenal and later at NASA became central to the U.S. space program. Other recruits contributed to missile development, aviation medicine, and even chemical and biological research. Jacobsen traces how these contributions fed into Cold War competition and later into civilian technologies. But she also traces darker legacies. The ethical compromises set precedents for secrecy, the normalization of recruiting morally compromised experts, and the institutional amnesia that allowed uncomfortable histories to be buried. For American readers, the book is a reminder that policy choices echo across generations.